Hi everyone, this is Tim Halverson with Sevenfold, where we unlock your creativity and productivity through the power of design technology. And in this episode, we're going to do a quick tips one on how to use the sort component in Grasshopper. And honestly, if you've never been exposed to this before, this is a essential component you're going to have to know how to use. And we're going to use two applications: how to use the plain coordinates component, as well as how to sort with a curve as a driver. So we're going to use two different methods, but you can really use it for anything. And let's go ahead and open up Rhino, launch open fresh Grasshopper, and let's get started. I'll see you inside. All right, so I have an example project set up here, and I've gone ahead and work sessioned in some context as well. And for this session, just to get access to some of the information in my model, I've gone ahead and I'm using Elephant as well as Pufferfish. If you don't already have those, head over to foodforrhino.com right now and download these plugins. But basically what I'm going to use those for is just to gather some of the information. And what we're going to do here is we're going to get all these trees and we're going to sort them. All right, so that's going to be our example. So to get going, I'm going to go ahead and click on the E for Elephant. I'm going to go to reference by layer and drag that in. And then I'm going to type in a panel, do an asterisk star, and then type in the context, and I'm going to do layer 01. So this is what this is doing, is basically getting the layer name, and what I'm going to do here is basically, I'm not going to explain this too much, but basically we're going to grab our information on this layer. All right. And I know from experience that all my information is on this sublayer. All right. And what we're getting out of that is some reference blocks, because each one of these is a tree, which is just a block that I've scaled to varying sizes. Then to unpack that, we're really just looking at this point here. So I'm going to just go to block, deconstruct block, and plug that in. And the P, I'm getting the origin point here. And to get rid of the grafting, I'm just going to type in shift list, shift paths. By typing in shift, plugging that in, I'm going to go back to my points here. And now what we're going to do is, with the pufferfish component, I'm just going to grab list indices, which is just going to grab the running list of points there. All right, and then what we're going to do is jump back to Elephant for a second, go to text, drop that in, and it's asking for planes and text. So I'm going to put my indexes as the text and the planes here, there. And then finally, I'm just going to grab a style quickly from my model. So I'm going to go to annotation styles. I'm going to grab this site plan anno, copy that, Control C, hit quotes and paste into a panel, and then plug that into the S for style, dimension style. And that's going to give me some text here. All right. And the main thing we want to focus on now is we can see that these are actually not in order. So we've got 200, 202, right? These are not in any logical order. They're fairly random. They jump around quite a bit. All right. So what I want to do is I just want to draw a curve. So I'm going to go up to here to my sort layer, and I'm just going to click on that. And I'm going to go over here to grab a control point curve, select that, and I'm just going to hold Alt to disable the snaps temporarily. And I'm just going to start drawing this like this. I kind of want to organize it this way, thinking of this as a lasso. And I'm just kind of wrangling all of these points. And generally, I'm just going to kind of organize it that way. So it's kind of in order of the site. All right, now that I've got my curve, I'm going to select it. I'm going to go back to Grasshopper, go to the params tab, go to curve, drop that curve in. right click on it and set one curve. This is a curve container. And now I've referenced that curve into the Grasshopper environment. Cool. So now what I want to do is I'm just going to right click and say reparameterize. So that's going to shift it from, instead of the full world length of this, it's going to reparameterize it from a percent from 0 to 1. And then what I'm going to do is we're setting up the sort. So the component we're looking at is sort. And the things that we're going to focus on here is keys. This is the thing that we need to organize against. And then the thing we're actually going to sort. So sometimes I like to actually rename this like the specific thing I'm planning to sort. So I'm planning to sort my points. And so I just rename that. All right. So what I'm getting out of here is actually planes. So what I want to do, if you see we zoom in here, we're actually getting planes. I'm just going to run dplane, deconstruct plane. And so that gives me the origin point. And I'm going to be sorting those points. So, okay. So now what I want to do is run a CP. If I type CP for curve closest point, and I plug this curve into the C and the origin point here into P, that's going to take all of these points and it's going to pull it right there. All right. So if we wanted to visualize that, we could do a quick 2-point vector, just real quick. Essentially, this is the origin point, and the anchor, so this A for anchor is going to be the origin, and plugging in that vector, you can see, just to visualize that at this point, the closest direction it was going was coming here, pulling it to the curve there. And yeah, so based off of this being our sorting curve, we're going to renumber based off of which ones are closest to the curve. All right, so that's just a visual. We're going to disable that. All right, so what I want to do is I want to evaluate based off of the t. So the parameter, that's the, if I just do a quick panel, this is going to be the percentage along that reparameterized curve. So this is from 0 to 1. And you can see we've got some stuff that's at 70%, some stuff that's at 2%. All right. And that's actually what I want to use. I could also use the distance it traveled, but the main thing I want to sort is the parameter. So wherever it is along this curve. All right. So that's going to be my key. And then plugging in my points, now we can see we went from this list here to a sorted list. All right, so these are our new sorted keys from 0 going all the way up to almost 1, which is the end of the curve here. All right, so if we do our same visualization of what's going on, and we just take those points, plug in the list indices and plug in those points there. Now if we shift those, we can see that we're getting something more organized. So you can see these we're grouping here. Whoops. So these are all clustering together. So 103, 101, 102. So these are all pulling to the curve. Now, if I change that, instead of the parameter, I could change it to the distance it had to travel. That would reshuffle it. So it would say these had to travel the least amount of distance to actually get to the curve. And then it's radiating out from that. So you can see this one only had to travel a small distance, and that's why it's number 2. So that would be a whole different sort mechanism, which is not what we want. All right, so we're gonna switch back to t, but know that that's kind of what's going on. Yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and bake that out. If you wanted to do multiple sorts too, you could pass information through. So if I wanted to hit this, I could take additional information like these points. I sometimes will pass through vectors, like maybe the z vector. It doesn't apply in this case, but sometimes I'll pass that through. And then that's getting resorted so it stays together with its point. So as I get these points out, I'm also getting the corresponding z vector that goes with it. So this could be a normal vector, this could be anything you can think of. So you can add additional anything you can think of to pass through. You don't have to do just one sort. Just know that the key is the critical one that you're sorting against. Okay. All right, moving on. So the next sort we're gonna look at really quick is gonna be by plane coordinates. All right, so I'm gonna set this one up real quick and I'll be back in a second here. So I'm gonna quickly move. I'm gonna get a random component here, and I'm also gonna grab a list length, and I'm gonna grab the length of all these points, and the random component, I'm gonna get a number, which is the length of my list. The seed is 2, that's fine. The range, I wanna change that. So instead of 0 to 1, I'm gonna change that to 0 to 55. And then I'm gonna move these in the unit z direction. And I'm gonna just, since my units are in inches, I'm gonna just multiply that by 12. So it changes it from 0 to 55 inches to 0 to 55 feet. And I'm gonna plug that into t, so my stuff's gonna move between 0 and 55 feet. And then I'm just gonna relay this with a component here and plug that in. And that's gonna give me some points here and that are just kind of randomly vertical. All right. Okay, so now that we've got our randomized points, we want to organize these based off of the vertical direction. Okay, so the way to do that is you can have any number of points, but we could say, actually, if I use my building here, I could say, take a plane. So I'm going to do a plane container, and I'm just going to manually input this. So I'm just going to say right click, set one plane. I'm going to come into my model here, set that plane. So set the origin, set the X direction, set the Y direction. And that set the plane right there. Just to visualize this, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to change the size up to like 36. Okay. And then I'm going to hide some of this other information. And then just to preview this, I'm going to put preview on, type swatch, and make it blue. Okay, cool. So now I've got my blue points, and that just helps me see things a little more clearly. Again, this is preview. So what I want to do is go to the vector tab and pull down plane. And then over here, we've got plane coordinates. And if I bring this in, it's asking for two things, a point or input points, and then a coordinate system or a plane to reference against. So my plane coordinate system is going to be this guy right here. And that I'm going to reference into the S right there. Just going to bring that down a little bit, organize it slightly. And then let's make this a little bigger. And then I'm going to feed in my points, which is the newly moved geometry right there. And what I'm getting out is a couple things. It's basically the relative X, Y, and Z coordinates. So in this case, it's just a vertical plane up and down, but we're going to change that in a second just to show how powerful this is. So I'm going to run my sort again. So just type SOR for sort. And I'm going to sort based against the Z. That's going to be my key. And I'm going to plug in my points here. And yeah, so basically when it's below, it's going to be a negative value. When it's above, it's a positive value. So if I look at my keys, you're going to see we're going to have some negative values here. This is in inches. And then the point that's sorted. Okay. So yeah, so basically if I just, let's do a little heat map. I think that would be helpful. So I'm going to type gradient. And I'm just going to actually go to the math tab, go to domain, grab bounds, and I'm going to plug that into the keys. And this is going to give me the full range that it's exposed to. So then I'm just going to do that, and then I'm going to deconstruct the domain. So just getting the start and end values, and I'm going to plug that in here to the upper and lower bounds. And then T, I'm actually going to use the Z value here. So I'm going to use the sorted keys rather than the input keys. I'm going to use the sorted keys. And then I'm just going to change these colors real quick because they drive me nuts. And then we're going to do a preview. And I'm going to put these colors into the M, and then my sorted points, which is in the A, if I just remember that, that's my points right there, into the G. Okay. And now you can see if I change this a little bit, I could actually pull in another color here. That would clarify even more. But we can see that the farther away the points go, all right, so we can see here that the farther away the points go, the more blue they are or the more red they are. And so you can see they're sorting along how close they are to this here. Now, I could also change something where if instead of just vertical, I could change this to be absolute value. So if I go to absolute, that's going to say, it's going to give me the closest points. So if I change that, make that the key. Now the difference here is it basically radiates out. So I don't know if this is clear, but basically in the middle, this is the green, which is the closest to that plane. And then as it goes away from that plane, it's going to continue to get more and more blue. So it's, in this case, when it's an absolute value, it goes both directions. And that's the way we usually solve for getting the closest point in one particular vector. So in this case, the relative Z direction. So this is extremely powerful because it helps you use a relative coordinate system to find information in your model. All right. So I use this all the time between the dedicated plane coordinates and the absolute value. This is just helping to visualize it. And again, if I wanted to do multiple sorts, I could pass through some of this information. So if I want to start by sorting by this value for the K, I could then pass through like the X, for example. And then And then from there, once it's sorted, I could reuse the X value and sort of pass it down the line. So anyway, this is a little bit more complicated than I want to get into for this quick tips, but essentially the sort component, if you haven't used it yet, it's kind of a critical thing to understand in Grasshopper, and I hope you found this useful. We'll cover other things in other videos like member index and how to graft with that. That's a key one to help sorting and branching. The other thing that's critical too is once you decide to sort and find the points, it's typically common to use an item component, and by default it's going to be 0. So if we grab the point, that's going to give me the lowest value in this case. So I'm sorting against the absolute Z value here, and that's going to give me the point that's absolutely the closest. So in this case, it's this guy. Out of all these points, this one right here is the point that in the Z direction is the closest to the level. Now, this might not be the most useful in this case, but you can imagine how you might want to use the item to cherry pick whatever you can think. So common sorting methods are going to be like length. So len, this is going to measure a curve length. You can use that as a key, so you can measure the curve. We talked about plane coordinates. That's really common. And then also closest point. So if you just type CP, we've got plane closest point, BREP closest point, curve closest point, surface closest point, right? So this is going to help you find things that are, these are all kind of essentially the same component, just dealing with different relative coordinates. And anytime you get a point like this or UVs, you can see it's a point data type. So you can always go from there and then deconstruct the point and use one of its parts as a sorting mechanism. So hopefully that gives you some things to think on, some things to chew on. We're going to use... Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Again, this is Tim Halverson with Sevenfold. I really appreciate you tuning in for this quick tips. I realize it got a little long there, but hopefully that gives you some context for how to use the sort component in Grasshopper. It's something that you're going to get in the habit of using all the time, whether it's grafting and sorting with that or making sense of the data that you're working with. The sort component is a foundational piece. You're going to be using it all the time. And I can't wait to see what you create next. So go ahead and hit subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on the notifications for the next videos we're going to be posting every single week. And if you have any ideas for what you'd like to see in the videos next, please leave those in the comments below. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'm excited to see what you make. All right, take care, guys, and until next time, see ya.